Yet another comedy from 2017 that I was hoping would be funny, I was hoping I would like it, only to be disappointed with yet another comedy from 2017. Actually, come to think of it, it seems like the only comedies that have worked for me so far this year were the ones I wasn't expecting would be good. The ones that I was dreading to see in theaters. So far, those have been the only ones that have been funny, or funny enough. The House is the newest Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler comedy, and it also has Jason Mantzoukas. Okay, the premise for this movie is quite entertaining, and should be good, or should be funny. Now, Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler's characters have a daughter in this film, and she's about to go off to college, about to go off to Berkeley. They promise that she can get a scholarship, because this town apparently has a scholarship for select people. But because the town has got budget restraints and are making a whole new pool for the community, they cut the scholarship. So Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler, they don't have enough money, they can't really take her off to college, so they do what almost any parent would do in this comedy situation. Lie and say, oh yeah, we got the money, don't worry, and then think of some crazy scheme to get rich. Thankfully, they have a friend played by Jason Mantzoukas that is down on his luck and he's getting divorced by his wife. He won't sign the papers because he has a feeling that they'll get back together. He also has a gambling problem and he's so sad and miserable. It's like, this trip to Vegas will really help me out. Being the friends, they help him out, and then eventually the three of them get the scheme to run a casino in the city in his house. Sorry, in the town. It's not a city. And so now that they're running a casino to try to get enough money to bring their kid to college, all the chaos and calamity ensues. So this movie might be a little bit difficult for me to review because I'm almost exactly in the middle, where there's enough of the film that I like to almost like, but there's an equal amount of things that I dislike, and so I'm really right down the middle with this film. But I always start off with the positives for my review, so let's get into the things that I did like about The House. For one, I did like the concept of the movie. I think it was a pretty funny concept, and they could have done a lot with it. In fact, they probably do a little bit too much with that concept, which is why the middle is so chaotic and jumbled. Now, Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler play the type of characters you'd expect in this movie, you'd expect in their comedies. And so if you like their comedic style, then most likely you'll like them in this movie. But at that same time, it feels like they're not doing anything too new, and for me, they're mostly hit or miss. I did kind of like how they got a little bit more hardened and a lot more criminal-like as they ran the casino, like they sort of turned to the dark side throughout the movie, or it was built through the movie. But surprisingly, the one that I liked the most in this movie was Jason Mantzoukas, which, honestly, he was one of the worst parts of Dirty Grandpa for me. That was probably the first role I saw him in, and he was just one of the annoying characters, one of the annoying multitude of annoying side characters in Dirty Grandpa that I completely hated. But as I saw him in more and more movies, I like him. I still hate him in Dirty Grandpa. That's never going to change, but I like him in this movie, and I've liked him in almost every other movie he's been in afterwards that I've seen. I found him to be the funniest in this movie, and I liked his whole trying to get back together with his wife who wants to divorce him, how he's sad and depressed at the beginning of the movie. There's honestly some really funny moments with that endeavor. There's a few other characters here and there that were kind of funny, but for the most part they're either just sort of bland or they are completely over the top and cartoony. Granted, I did love the cameo that was in this movie towards the end, and just the fact that it was that actor made me laugh. There's a lot of times where I did laugh in this movie and I enjoyed myself, but there was also really long stretches where I wasn't really laughing and wasn't really smiling at all. Let's face it, when you're watching a comedy and there's long moments where you're not laughing, you feel like the movie drags on. And there are moments when this movie feels like it drags on, and some of the jokes that aren't funny just keep getting repeated or just keep stretching out to the point where it's like, okay, move on to the next joke. There are definitely a lot of interesting ideas for me and just enough laughter throughout where I didn't feel myself completely bored. I didn't feel like I was completely wasting my time. And this is where it feels like I'm a little bit more in the middle, where I don't know whether I like it or dislike it, because there's enough dislikes to counter the things that I like. Not only are there long stretches in this movie where I didn't laugh at all, there's a few times, like I said, where a lot of the jokes just keep going and keep getting stretched out. Because it does feel like there's a lot of improv, especially towards the beginning and throughout the entire middle of the film, where they're just throwing out joke after joke to the point where it's like, okay, get on with the scene. And it's good if those jokes are funny, but sometimes those jokes aren't, and it feels like the scene just drags on. And so some of the scenes in the trailer, when it is cut down to the bare minimum, the trailer is funnier than the scenes in the actual movie, because sometimes these jokes that are really fast-paced in the trailer are actually really stretched out and long and too long, and they're just not as funny as the trailer. Oh, I did forget to mention in the good that there is some really violent, bloody scenes in this movie, and those I found twistedly funny. Overdramatic and overly crazy and just overblown, but I found it funny. I think what this movie is lacking is real structure. Because the beginning of the movie sets it up quite nicely, but then during the middle it just feels like running gag after running gag after running gag. The whole middle of the film feels like a bunch of shorts or a bunch of Saturday Night Live sketches, and there's not enough cohesiveness to really feel like it's plot points of a story. It's just like, oh, here's a funny thing that we can do with these people running a casino, here's a funny thing we can do, and here's another funny thing. And so that whole middle of the film feels like it's lacking some structure. There are moments in that middle where there is plot points of the overall story, but it feels like they're so far and few between, and it feels like the focus is on everything else but the plot points, to the point where it feels like, oh, that must not be that important to the story, and then turns out, oh, actually that is pretty important by the end. And then when you get to that final act of the film, it is more structured, but it feels like there's just not enough setup and not enough build-up. Like, it's there, but it's not enough to really make you feel like you care. Or at least it wasn't enough for me to care about the last act, and then the whole last act of the film felt like it was just a mess because it wasn't properly built in a cohesive and developed in a detailed way, or detailed enough. And so the third act of the film feels like just a hobbled mess put together, and it's like, oh, we gotta have an ending to the story, we gotta make a story, here we go. And also theme-wise and story-wise is trying to add a little bit too much for the sake of this movie. Like, it gets to a point in the middle of the film where it almost feels like they completely forgot about the story, and where this is about raising enough money to send their kid off to college. It gets to a point in the film where you almost completely forget that the girl even exists. Granted, it could be because the parents are spending all their time running this casino at night, and so there is a scene where they realize they're missing out on being with their daughter and stuff, but it's not really enough to really make the dramatic moment significant. Then there's this whole thing, even though I kind of like it, it almost feels completely out of place, where these parents are like these safe, clingy parents, and suddenly, as the casino's running, they become more hardened and more criminal-like. There are moments in this where it just gets too goofy and too crazy, where it jumps into stupidity. And so for me, like I said, I'm right down the middle for the house. There's things that I like and things that I dislike, and they equal out to a very meh movie or a very meh experience. And so I'm going to give the house 2.5 stars. Like I said, right down the middle. So, did you see The House? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews of 2015, 2016, or 2017. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.